Alright, so now we're going to take a look at colliders and triggers. So let's take a look at our collider for our third person controller. Go ahead and select your player and zoom in on him. Now this little green wireframe that you see around our character controller, that is our collider. Now if you take a look at your inspector panel over here in the character controller, we have all the settings for this collider here. If you want to adjust the size of the collider, you can either go down to the radius and the height and adjust those values, or you can also hold down your shift key and you'll get these little squares around your collider. Go ahead and drag those open. You can see that it gets bigger. You can also do the same thing with the height. And you can see that the radius and the height have been changed as well. Alright, and then our first setting right here is our slope limit. We can revert to the prefab to show you what it looks like from the default settings. So right now it's set to 45 degrees. So the slope limit is at 45 degrees, meaning if there's a slope that's greater than 45 degrees, then we will not be able to walk above it. So let's go ahead and change this. First, let's go ahead and hit play. So we have a slope limit of 45 degrees. So if I try to walk up this sphere here, you can see that I'm being blocked. But if we walk up these stairs, I can walk above the sphere just fine. That's because the slope limit above the stairs right here is less than 45 degrees. But everything else around it is greater than 45 degrees. So we can change that. We can change the slope limit to say 90 degrees. And we can try it again. There we go. Now we can walk above the sphere. Alright, now the next one is the step offset. So the step offset refers to the distance between the floor and the stairs. So right now, if the step offset is less than 0.3 from the ground and the stairs, then we can walk above those stairs. So let's go ahead and play. And we're able to walk above the stairs. But if I go ahead and change the value to something really, really small, like 0.001, press enter, press play, you can see that I'm being blocked. That's because the distance between the ground and the stairs is greater than 0.001. So let's go ahead and just change this back to 0.3. Alright, and then finally we have our skin width. The skin width basically determines the amount of penetration between our two colliders. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and change the values. So we're able to walk on the ground just fine. And that's because the skin width is set at 0.08, which is very little penetration between the mesh collider of our plane and the collider of our character controller. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this up. You can see when I do that, he basically starts floating above the ground. And that's because our colliders are interacting with each other. Let's go ahead and bring this back down. Now you don't want a value too small because then our character controller will actually start having issues getting stuck with the other colliders. But that is our character controller collider. Let's take a look at a few others. So each one of these objects has a collider. This sphere right here has a collider right here. It's a sphere collider. This cube over here has a box collider, as you can see right here. And these are just boxes as well, or cubes. So let's take a look at the collider for this cube over here. So if we uncheck the mesh renderer, all we have left is our collider. And once again, you can hold your shift key and expand this collider. There we go. Now if we check the mesh renderer back on, you can see that our cube is still there, but now our collider is much bigger. So if we try to make this collider much, much bigger than what it is now, I'd say about there, maybe a little bit wider, and I press play, we try to walk towards this cube, you can see that we start getting blocked pretty early on. That's because our collider is actually preventing us from reaching that cube. So this collider can be useful for preventing players from walking into certain areas. So you can uncheck the mesh renderer, and now we have a invisible collider. Alright, so that is how to use colliders. Let's go ahead and create a trigger. So to create a trigger out of a collider, go ahead and just select is trigger from the collider menu. Now when we hit play, actually let's go ahead and bring the mesh renderer back on. Press play. Now you can see that I'm able to walk through the collider. So the way triggers work is that once we walk into a trigger, we can activate an event. So triggers would be useful for a script. So we can say we want our character to walk into the trigger, and once he does that, we can go ahead and play an animation or have an event that will be triggered by this collider here. So that is how you use colliders and triggers.